Welcome to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success, the podcast for sellers that want to get better at selling enterprise software. Whether you are new to the industry or an old pro, please make our podcast your one-stop shop for the latest and greatest in insights and news with respect to enterprise software sales. I'm Kevin Donville, and I'm joined by my illustrious comrade, Matt Long. Matt and I together have over 50 years of experience with professional software sales, deployments, implementations, and consulting. And we're very, very glad that you've joined us here today. Matt, how are you doing on this wonderful Friday?
I'm doing great. I feel like I've joined the Communist Party, though, now that I'm your comrade.
I said comrade. I meant to say colleague. It's interesting how my brain went there. It wasn't quite where I was planning to go, but it does follow an interesting kind of metamorphosis in my brain. But no, I was reflecting, in preparation for this week's podcast, you and I were talking, and we talk a lot about what goes on with our efforts to getting our podcast together. And, when we first made the decision to go forward with our podcast, there was a lot of noise out there trying to sort through that. So today we've got a guest on here with us who is an expert at all things related to podcasts, Ryan Sullivan. Ryan, how are you doing today, sir? It's good to have you with us.
I'm doing fantastic. I make podcasts and I'm on a podcast. So, this is it. This is why I exist.
Hopefully the preparation for this one is easier than you preparing for your own.
Hopefully. Oh, you mean, well, I don't prepare at all. So yeah, this is much easier.
It sounds like us. We don't put any preparation in together. We just get on and we wing it together every single week. But no, all things being jokes here. Ryan, you've got a great reputation in the market. You've got a wonderful following with respect to the people that you have educated in how to do podcasts and make them better, make them a significant portion of their business. But for those who are listening to the podcast who don't know you, could you take a moment and kind of expand a little bit upon that? Tell people who you are, what you do, and how you do it.
Yeah, so appreciate it, by the way, having me, both of you. But Kevin, we had connected a while ago, so it's awesome to come full circle and actually be able to be on the podcast. So I'm grateful for it. I appreciate it. In terms of what I do, in the most simple way possible, music, podcasts, and creative strategies. That's what my kind of life has formed into. Those are in the form of creating podcast strategies for businesses. Sometimes it moves beyond that, where I'm creating a full content strategy that would be involving all of the content that the business would make. That's at least organic, meaning like not paid, right? So that's what I do. I basically create strategies. I'm in the ideas game. Sometimes they're really, really good and they hit, and sometimes they're really, really good and they don't hit. And so that's how it goes. But yeah, music, podcasts, got a bunch of random passions as well, but that's a little bit about me.
No, it's wonderful. And as I said before, I've learned a lot by watching your material and consuming some of your content and watching some of your podcasts and the people you've talked with. I found it to be really enlightening from the perspective of, you say you're in the ideas game. And when you're trying to start a business, ideas are important to being able to identify the strategy that you want to come up with when you go forward into the marketplace. With that being in mind, I know you do a lot of work with individual podcasters, but also businesses, companies that want to go forward into starting their own podcast presence. What could like a small, emerging, or even a mid-sized company hope to gain by bringing a podcast to the marketplace?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's that. There's also, how are we going to make any money from this thing, which we will kind of unpack throughout this. Why would you? There's so many benefits. I'll start with the person asking the question. If you're going to be on the podcast, that's going to get you a lot of benefits in terms of like name recognition, PR, thought leadership is the term that they throw out there, whatever that means, that's what you're going to get. So there's that side. Then there's the business side, right? You're creating an asset. So, what happens is with marketing is you invest a certain amount of money, right? And then the thing you get back is an asset. Now, an ad can be an asset, right? But you need to pay Meta or pay these companies to run that ad. And the second you stop paying, they go, well, there goes your asset. So the podcast is an asset, not because you invest in it, but because it appreciates over time. Meaning that episode, the more views it gets from the right people, the less it costs you to make, because the more money you make from, through attribution, that one episode, so to say, right? So when it comes to why to start one, there's a lot of reasons. For the most part, I never have to really tell people why they should. Normally, they come to me with the reason they think they want to start it, and then we figure out if it really makes sense. But the benefits are whatever you choose them to be. And there are a lot of them. It's just you have to choose which ones you want. And that typically is not an easy thing to do.
You've helped a lot of companies get started with their podcast. What are some of the companies or the types of companies that have come to you with that kind of approach and saying, "Hey, we're thinking this might be something to do"?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest podcast that we have ever worked on in terms of longest lasting plus, largest amount of listeners would be in the life insurance niche, which if you would have told me that, I didn't know what life insurance was. I mean, I would say I still really don't know, but I have a policy, that's for sure. But no, from working on this podcast, I know a lot more about it. So there's life insurance. I mean, the three segments that we really focus in on are law, finance, and coaching. Just because these are the segments that there's really, and accounting too, I'll throw in there too under that finance realm. These are a lot of segments where there's not really that much content out there about it, right? And of course, personal finance, there's a lot. But what we do is with everybody, right, regardless of the industry that comes to us, we go, what's your niche? They tell us. Then we go one layer below that. And then that's really where we penetrate with the podcast. So we find these kind of gaps, no matter the market. Could be a SaaS company that's solving a really niche issue in coding, which is much better, in my opinion. The more niche, the better, right? The smaller, the better. Or it could be something like, what I've worked on, my own bank, my business banking platform that I use. They approached us and we helped them start a podcast. And guess what? They didn't end up doing it. It didn't make sense for them, right? So it doesn't matter the size. This is a bank that has gotten $100 million in funding and they didn't end up doing it, right? So it depends on so many different factors. But at least for me, the ones that are the biggest, the most life-changing, the largest impact have been really under the finance umbrella. But don't get me wrong, I've worked in hip hop, I've worked with mentalists, I've worked with celebrities, I've done that stuff too. It can work there too, just in a different way.
So is the first step then, if someone turns around, small, medium business, or even a large business, as you were saying, or an individual, they decide, okay, you know what, I think we need to go do a podcast. I want to get a presence out there. I want to go and start building my reputation. Is that first step of them identifying what their niche is? Because maybe they don't know. And if they don't get that right, is that is that something, a step they could get wrong? Should they even attempt until they really understand that?
I mean, I suggest that you have a business strategy. Then I suggest that you have a brand strategy. Then I suggest that you have a marketing strategy. And then I suggest that you have a content strategy. And then under that content strategy is where I would like the podcast to live. I really shouldn't be doing any of that work above content strategy, at least for podcast principles and what I would do as a strategist. You should have a branding person in-house, or you're learning it as the CEO. You should have a business coach who understands how we're scaling, or somebody that knows how to scale, right? If that's what you're doing. Meaning, like, you should have these other pieces in place because it makes your life so much easier. The one thing that I say over and over again is the worst thing that you can have is a successful podcast and an unsuccessful business. So you don't want to have all these people obsessed with listening to you, but then you don't really understand your core offer and your core message and what you really sell. So yes, the answer is, that's the long answer. The quick answer is yes, have that figured out ideally. I'm also not against you figuring out as you go. I mean, some of our clients have done that. We had clients who had maybe 10 clients when they started their podcast, and now they have 600 to 700 clients, and now it's a 7-figure business. So I have arguments each way, but I would like to, for, anybody who's doing this under the umbrella of a business, to have a lot of those other foundational pieces.
How
right?
do you
Classic
recommend that
ready.
people get started? I mean, it's like, do they just get a microphone and a camera and go at it, or do they outsource, or does it really depend upon what resources they have and what their appetite is?
The annoying answer is it depends, but the fun answer is yes, get started. Like, let's try this. Like, if this was you guys, I mean, Kevin and I spoke, a while back. If you guys were starting the podcast and we weren't here right now, I would go to Kevin and be like, hey, get you guys co-host, try co-hosting, try doing solo,
Mm.
and then try doing an interview. The more of those you do, the better. Don't do anything with them. Just put them in a Google Drive. Let them sit there. Listen to them in the car. Send them to friends, colleagues, right? Competitors. I don't care, right? Send them to people who have no stake in the game to tell you that it's good or not, right? So that's what I recommend. Don't officially start. Just start doing it, because the one thing that I don't teach and I can't teach and I will never teach is podcasting. You learn that on your own. I help with everything else.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting you would mention that because, Matt and I are used to speaking in front of rooms of people on a professional basis, been doing it for 30 years. But it is different when you've got a microphone in front of you and the camera's pointed in your face, and it is the sole basis of the content is the opinions and information that you're sharing. You're not speaking to a presentation. You're not speaking to a pitch. You're talking about concepts, and it is
Mhm.
a very different kind of communication style. So yeah, as we've gone along, which is what, episode 34, I think, by the time we go and publish this, way smoother now. If you when we take a look at some of the earlier ones, I sit there and cringe and kind of wish, hey, could I take that one down and maybe like put that in an archive somewhere? But it's also true that as our message got clearer about the things we wanted to talk about the lessons we wanted to teach, the conversations just became more organic. So I get what you're saying from that perspective of know what it is you want to be talking about, what your message is at a business level, and letting that guide your opinion, guide the conversation
Yeah.
that when you're talking with someone. So a little bit of rough around the edges, then I guess that's really not a problem then if you're going forward, if what you're talking about is genuine to you as a speaker.
There's no perfection here because you
Mm,
don't get to decide what's good.
mm. Yeah, that's a
There's
good point.
it was great that I started in music, because when I started, I've released a song and you would think that nobody listened to it. No, everybody listened to it that I knew. Like, when I started a podcast, hundreds of people listened to it and I was 19 years old. It was after that, when I kept going, that nobody listened, because I didn't know how to keep them going, right? So that's what it is. Like, the market still decides. Like, as I go, I realize how much I don't know, right? And I realize how much it really is on the market to decide whether this is good or not, So it's weird. It's a weird level of stress that founders put themselves under, where it's like, yeah, my business, my life has to be good. My kids have to be in this college. My car has to be like this. My business has to be this revenue, blah, blah, blah. And my podcast has to have 1 million downloads. And my videos on LinkedIn need to get 1 million views. It's like, who cares, man? Like, it's just it doesn't matter that much. Can you just make something, and we'll probably get to this, but make something that people want to watch? And that's really all we're trying to do here. So, but yeah, it's a very, very common thing. I fight it every day too. And it's the reason why we're here. Perfectionism got you to the here because you care so much. But when it comes to content and podcasting, it's creative art. People spend millions, billions sometimes on creative projects, and there's no ROI. It just didn't work, right?
Right.
Look at most movies ever made, right?
Yeah, I think our philosophy from the beginning, at least mine, was let's just get it out there, start doing it. And, it's going to improve over time. We all know that, right? And also not feeling like you have to go back and get rid of the early ones. It's like, honestly, how many people are going to go back and listen for our first podcast? I don't know. Maybe they
Well,
will, maybe they
you'd be
won't.
surprised too, because
Oh, yeah.
my shows that I have, that I just looked today, the 2,500 downloads this month already, from one of our shows. I went back to their first 10 episodes. Each of their first 10, all of the first 10 have over 1,000 downloads. That means that in the first 6 months, those first 10 had less than 100 downloads. So that means over the course of the last 4 years, 800 people went back and listened, right? So yes, you don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep it there,
Would you recommend ever going back and then just pulling some stuff if you just thought it wasn't up to quality, or just leave it up there?
No. Yeah, leave it up there. I just can't. I mean, it depends, of course, right? Did you say something that now in the future you shouldn't have
It
said?
didn't
So we
age very
have.
well.
Yeah, if it didn't, typically that's not our domain, but it does happen. Hey, listen, it's not to say I've never deleted a post, or I've never taken stuff down. I've taken a lot of stuff down because I switched gears, but I just can't. There's not a really good argument for it, I don't think, just because, again, we don't know.
Yeah, I can see that though with respect to, you were talking about as an organization, you should understand your message. What is it you're trying to say to people first? And if that does change, and Matt and I work with some smaller companies that have gone back to the drawing board a couple of times and gone scorched earth with respect to their offerings and rethought them and reformulated them over again. And were they to have had content up from a podcast from those original efforts, they may be very inconsistent with what it is they're trying to say today. So in those cases, yeah, I get what you're saying. Go off, pull those down, and start afresh. But as long as it's consistent, I get what you're saying. I've gone back, I look at our metrics on a lot of our episodes, and it's interesting to me how some of our earliest episodes have had some of the more interesting growth when we get a guest on that spurs a lot of conversation and a lot of downloads. That's when we'll often see a corresponding spike with the old episodes as people go back in to learn more about it because we've brought in new people and they want to know more about us. So I get what you're saying there. Leave it up. It's part of your legacy.
Yeah, why not? It's my argument.
I guess I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, just in terms of applying this to software sales or selling in the market in general, right? We think that it's really valuable, but I'd like to hear your thoughts around it because, as a seller, what is your ability to actually get a podcast in place? Is it something that you have to convince the company to do? Is it something that you could just start on your own? I think we have a couple people that have done that as well. But what are the benefits to a company or someone in sales to have a really good podcast out there that they can refer to?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'll start with the benefits. The complications, there's a lot there with doing this, but start with the benefit. So a salesperson, right? Their job is to help, right? So it's not to sell. It's never to sell. If you're like Andy Elliott, Grant Cardone, Dean Graziosi, okay, great. Maybe you consider it selling. That's fine. I don't mind. I love the word sales. I love the word marketing. I use it all the time. But in reality, it's just solving a problem, right? So if that is the case, then how can we accelerate? What if we could help them before we even help them? That's what a podcast can do, because they can listen to this episode and take either of us and go, well, I got about an hour of time down with these guys, or myself or one of you. And that adds an hour, So of time if you went right to that call, they would have 0 minutes of you helping them, right? So what this is called in the broader cultural context is called a parasocial relationship. This is the relationship you have with your favorite TV host with, at one time it was Howard Stern. Now it could be Joe Rogan, but you listen to so much of somebody and then you believe you know them because you do know them. They just don't know you. So that's my argument for using it as, if you are a salesperson, you are never, ever going to sell, ever. Not at all. Right? Now, not to say there's no call to action. That could be to your email list. That could be the lead magnet. That could be to the next episode. Comment, like, subscribe, follow, right? Maybe even a book a call, maybe. But For the most part, there's no selling involved too. So like just to paint the picture, you're going to get on a camera, you're going to talk. People are going to take your advice if it's good. And then when they get to the call, they go, "Oh yeah, I already know. Like we're going to work together. I just want to get through let's just go through the details." Right. So that's what a podcast can do for the benefits.
So you were saying though that the complications getting there, it's easy to say. There's a lot of upsell there, a lot of positives, but it can be complicated to get there. What are some of the complications people might need to prepare themselves for?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in sales and you are going to start a podcast, you buying into it is step one, of course. That is not the final boss. The boss is the final boss, right? So if you're using any company time, any company resources, now we're doing a different thing. If you want to start your hobbyist podcast, that's fine. They don't care. Talk about sports all day long in your man cave with your friends, right? Just don't say anything too political. But if you're going to do that, great. But if you're going to use, like I said, company resources, now we have to go. It has to be leadership. It's not even just a manager above you to okay. I mean, we have CFO decisions that have to happen now. And like, why does this one guy think he's going to just do a podcast when all the other guys are hitting phones or what have you, right? So the complications come when you don't get the buy-in. And I wish it was enough for just you, the salesperson, to buy into podcasting and video content and LinkedIn. I've never seen it work out where that's enough to really do it to the extent it needs to be done to actually work. So I would go to the CEO if you can. I would start with the marketers. Because if you have somebody in there who believes that, then now we have a path, right? Because really what you're doing is you're marketing. You're not selling, right? So you have to get buy-in from marketing to go, hey, I'm making your life 10 times easier. I'm creating a ton of content for you guys. I'm even putting myself out there as the face of this brand, and I'm taking zero extra equity for it. I just need some resources. And if you guys can show, hey, how this is going to help you, right? Then you could show how it's going to help us as a company, and then I can get that buy-in, So this is a complicated process. This is politics. This is navigating people, and I'm not saying it's easy. If you want the fast forward, most people who I've seen have ended up just leaving the company if their podcast is that good or was that good, doing it on their own and starting their own business. But that's just what I've seen. I'm not saying I haven't seen intra-company podcasts. I've just seen a lot of them hit a wall for one reason or another. And here's the last one. If you leave that company, hey, that's their podcast.
Right.
Not yours. Now you got to start it all over again, right? So not saying don't do it. At its best, it's incredible. At its worst, may piss a couple of people off.
Yeah, I can see how it'd be really confusing or complicated once you start getting legal involved. And then, jar. I mean, it's like everyone wants to say, and not saying what is actually being put out there, right? On behalf of the company. And that can get very confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I think would be super beneficial and probably easier sell internally would be let's get our customers on and talk with them about what the benefits are, how they start using the product, what they want to do, et cetera, because everyone wants good case studies and customer stories, right? And a lot of times I've seen them, you get a video crew in and you spend a whole day in a room and then, you're doing these little snippets and they're all spliced. It's very professional. But I think there's something to be said for just the naturalness of a podcast and that discussion, right? That's where I think the roundtables and on, at conferences and things are great. People like that. But what are your thoughts about that as an angle in terms of, a way to kind of pitch this and start a podcast for a company?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be a podcast. If it's just podcast style, that's really what you're saying, right?
Right.
I mean, this is what we do. We had a founder the other day, private lending company, and they were like, we just want to get in the studio and record. We don't want to do a whole podcast. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing this for? They're like, we want video for our meta ads. We just want video versions of our ads. And I'm like, okay. So then, me and my GM, we both came in and we directed two of their employees on camera and we did the direction and they were the talent. And it was awesome. They have great ads. They have 10, 20, 30 clips for social media. And then next quarter, come back and do it again. Doesn't have to be a podcast, right? And this is a
Mm,
service we have now because this happened so many times where I was going, yeah, guys, this doesn't make sense. Like, we don't have a podcast here. Why are we going to kid ourselves? Let's just do podcast style content. And to
mhm,
your point about client interviews, that's what I call them. Alex Hormozy will call them success interviews. Everybody's kind of got their word for it. Case study, nobody cares about case studies. Like, you'll never find somebody go, that case study was wow. Like, no, they don't. It's not, the case study is not for them to consume the case study. The case study is for them to know you're not scamming people. Okay, I know that guy. He's a client. Okay, great. You're legit now in my eyes, right? What we do is we create client interviews. The client interview does not talk about the service. It doesn't talk about the product. It sits the client down and goes, so how did you feel before you went into this? For my clients, it would be, my first question is, why did you start a podcast? It has nothing to do with me, right? Because the second it has to do with me, now we're off. Now we lost the magic. The
mm.
magic is the emotion the client had before, the transformation they went through, and then the emotion they have now, because that's what people resonate with. So I don't care if it's a podcast. I don't care if you're, hiring pigeons to send letters in the mail. There's some kind of emotion there, that and transformation. That's what people really are attracted to. I mean, that's why podcasts work so well, because this is just us talking. Of course, a little bit of formatting, but if I didn't really do this, I couldn't do this. You
Mm.
know, I mean, even actors struggle to act. So you can't make up a podcast. You can't fake it for an hour. It just doesn't happen. It's very real.
And what about
Yeah.
the cadence of podcasts and just the regularity of releases and things? Is there a sweet spot for that, or is it just a matter of just being consistent with whatever time frame you choose?
This is a good one. I'll just make it quick. No, there's just averages. That's all I can give you. Like, an average podcast is weekly.
Mhm,
An average length of podcast is 30 minutes. From what I've seen, it's this is what I would say. Either start a podcast or don't. Like, start a weekly podcast where you're really caring, you're going to put the time in, you're taking them on a journey every single week, or
mm,
do what we just mentioned, which is podcast style content. It's not to say don't do a webinar here and there or a Q&A here and there, but don't call it a podcast, right? Like, either commit or don't commit. That's my
mm.
answer to how many you should release.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying there from that perspective. Matt and I are really big fans and supporters of the concept of storytelling with respect to how we want to train folks to be able to engage with customers and prospects in the sales context. And when you're talking about those success stories, I mean, that's what you got going on there. You're delivering a lot of the same things, like to your point came out of the case study, but you're delivering them in a storytelling capacity where the emotional buy-in is already there because you're hearing it straight from the source of the person that received that benefit.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think that is an opportunity that a lot of software companies are sort of underutilizing? As it sounds to me like I don't know of a lot of companies that are doing that. They're doing the webinars, like you said, they're doing the Q&As, but that storytelling opportunity, I don't know if there's a lot of folks taking advantage of that.
Well, in my opinion, software companies are focused on the thing that doesn't really matter, which is the freaking software.
Okay.
Because as a consumer, I don't give a shit about your software. As a customer, I don't care. Like, I don't care if Netflix tomorrow goes, hey guys, we're going to rebrand. We're going to call it Zubu. All right. Does it have the show that what is it? What is the reality show that everybody, Love Island? Does it have Love Island? Like, I don't care, man. Like, Netflix is like, hey, and I know this is not a software or whatever. People are going to get mad, but imagine, who knows, even QuickBooks. Hey, Intuit goes, hey guys, we bought QuickBooks. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Like, does my QuickBooks work? Yes. Okay,
Mm.
great. Call it whatever you want. Do whatever features you want. It just doesn't matter. So I think a lot of times this happens in all areas of business forever, right? And always, right? The lawyer thinks that people give a shit about his billboard and the name and that we don't care. Can you solve my problem? Are you going to get me my money? Right? So yes, the answer is yes. less software, more stories, people using the software to achieve this result,
Mhm.
Like I've done hundreds of thousands of revenue and like, thousands and thousands of transactions or, you know, revisions a month, for example, using the client portal that I have. They should come to me and be like, "Hey, we saw you're doing like all this revenue through the portal. Do you mind just coming on our podcast and just tell us about your business? Don't even have to tell us about the portal." And through that interview, I'm going to be like, "This portal is awesome." And, there's a couple
Mhm.
things that I
Yeah.
wish would change, but, for the most part, that's why I've been using you guys for this long. Like, I'm going to give the testimonial without you even asking. So that's always my shtick of like, you don't have to talk about really, you don't have to talk about what it is. Just talk about who you are, talk about who they are, and talk the customer and talk about what they do. And then that's it. Just stay in those lanes. I'm not saying don't post the "we got this award." That's fine. That's a good clout, good clickbait, it's good PR. That should be 1 to 2% of it. I mean, Descript did this brilliantly, podcast editing suite. They just their ads are just, I didn't have a podcast because it sucked to edit. Now I do. I use Descript to edit. It's just the most mindless, simple ad in the world, and people love it because it's just real, So
Because that's
that's
them. They see themselves as that guy sitting or
they
gal
go,
sitting
"I
in the
don't
chair.
want to edit." Now, here's the thing. In Descript, by the way, guys, and Riverside, you have to edit. You are editing. We can call it something else if you want. That's why I don't edit anything. I'm not an editor, right? But it doesn't matter. It gets you to sign up and pay the $15 a month, and now you're in, right? And 3 years go
Mm.
by, and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm still using this thing." But what's the alternative? But yeah, I think just so many people, little bit of a rant, but I feel like a rant that needs to be said is like, stop focusing on your product. Focus on the people using the product.
Yeah.
And
Makes
I think
sense.
for the just for the finishing of the podcast and the editing, just the production and all that stuff, I think that Kevin does an amazing job for us. I know it's a lot of time and effort, right? I think one of the benefits, though, beyond a nice polished podcast that is getting good traction, is then all the other video content potentially that you can then
Right.
repurpose, right? Because video is kind of king now on all the platforms. The trick is finding the little snippets or things that are compelling enough, that I think are cohesive and convey a message. And of course, the AI in these platforms is going to do it for you, which doesn't, but give you a little head start. But what are your recommendations? After you get the podcast going, how do you see people actually being able to leverage that across different platforms or different marketing campaigns, or to really extend the reach and value of it?
Yeah, this is good. So if you do a podcast, you have a content system
Mm.
because just by it, the nature of it being in this case, let's talk about video podcasts. You have audio, you have video, you have graphic design, you have text in the form of transcription. Do whatever you want with that transcription. You got an email list. You got take 100 episodes, put it together. There's a digital product or even a book. So
Mm.
on just by you starting it, it is a content, what we call system or ecosystem, right? And
Mhm.
so what we do is, and for our business and also for our clients, is all we do is look at how much we spend on the podcast year over year and then revenue, right? And then that's it. We don't do any other marketing, right? It's LinkedIn, YouTube, podcast, ecosystem. So yeah, it can do whatever you want it to do. It can be all of your LinkedIn content. It can be all of your email content, or at least most, because you're curating it, right? I don't
Mm.
just release a transcript to my email list and be like, "Hey guys, here's your transcript." Like, I don't even drop the episode. I weave the story in. So then at the end of the email, it says, "And if you want more on how to do this, then it's in the episode," right? So it's ways to, the way I look at it, the podcast is a product that you create. Like for SSO, the podcast is your first tier. It's your free tier. Then above that free tier is like a discovery call. And then above that is an engagement or maybe an audit or something that's one time. And then one time and above that's recurring. And then, so that's how I look at it. Sure, it's a content ecosystem, right? It's an asset that you own, but it's also a product
Mm.
that essentially you sell. And what the listeners do is they don't give you their money yet, but they give you their time. So that's how I treat it.
That was an interesting epiphany. They are investing. They're investing. They're paying us with their time, which is absolutely true. And today, time is probably one of the most valuable commodities there is in business.
And that's why it has to be good, because you don't have a second chance, right? That's why it has to be specific, you know? That's why I don't go on podcasts talking about things I don't know unless I expect to get nobody to listen to it. Because it's everything now. Life is economy. It's just everything's insane. There's content everywhere. Phone, most people are watching podcasts not on their phones, on their TV. And so and that's a crazy data point, but that's what's happening. When we say you're competing, they're one click away from Tim Ferriss, 1 billion downloads. They're one click away from Rogan, trillion downloads. Like, they're one click away from clicking off your shit to an entertainment thing. So it has to be good. Like, the competition is not just your competitors who have a boring podcast. It's like everything, you know? And that's tough. So that's really where the strategy comes in. Again, nothing guarantees the listeners. It at least guarantees that we have something that we already have some data to know people want to know about this.
Yeah, I think we consistently break the cardinal rule of the 30-minute podcast, because ours tend to go 45.
It's an average.
50.
Why would we want to be average, right? It's fine.
Yeah.
It's an average,
I
not
don't
a rule.
know.
There's no rule.
It is challenging, though, because we do get very engaging people on. We ask a lot of questions. I think we could be a little bit more succinct in some of our podcasts, but at the same time, it's if someone wants to listen to it all, it's all there. If they want to buzz out early, they can as well. So
yeah, and you do the clips. You have the other forms of it. Like I do so many clips because I know that there's so much value baked into episodes, and most people don't have the time, and a very select few of them do, and those are my podcast listeners and my YouTube people, my subs on YouTube. But that's fine. I consider you a podcast listener if you just watch a 1-minute clip. You count. That's fine. You're a podcast listener for a minute. That's totally cool with me. I did my job.
So when should people reach out to you? Like when they're just considering this, or where they already have a plan? You mentioned, having some sort of brand strategy already, but can they talk to you beforehand and kind of get things set up?
Yeah. So we actually have a program for this to test drive podcasting, right? It's called the Ghost Podcast. It's a podcast without a podcast, And so we've been doing this for almost a year now, where we'll come in with you, do a content strategy, because you might not have one, or you maybe want to refresh it. Then we record for an hour or two. Then our team goes and turns that into clips for you. So you really get to test drive the podcast, right? So if you don't want to do a whole one, then we have that. And again, this is not just us, by the way. Like, many, many people have similar programs. I'm not saying use us. Use somebody that you know, like, and trust. But we designed that because we do want you to spend some money and time to know that you don't want to do it too, because you don't want to get a year in and be like, this wasn't right? So let's test fast, so then we can start fast, if that makes sense. And then we're going to launch a whole podcast, and we have predictable revenue, right? We know where our next customer is coming from. Our team is pretty solid, right? There's no like massive hires we have to make in the next 6 months, most likely. Yeah, then that's normally the time, because you already have something great. We're just going to start to amplify it.
Excellent. I get that whole thing. I mean, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, the learning curve's there. And you can bump into sharp edges on the furniture very, very easily along the way. And I think Matt and I got lucky that we kind of found our formula, our voice, and what we wanted to say very early on. Could have very easily gone down a completely different path and could have not turned out as well for us. So I totally get what you're saying. So I would encourage people, if they aren't sure about the things you just talked about, what is my voice? What is it we're trying to say? How do we want to say it? That reaching out to somebody like you, particularly, would be a great first step with respect to properly executing a podcast, making it land the first time the right way.
Yeah, and not knowing, or knowing that it's not right for you, is equally as important as knowing that.
Exactly. Yeah. In sales, we call that qualifying out. If it's not an opportunity, Walk away,
There's
spend your
always a
time, and
term
your energy
for it.
somewhere else.
I love it. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, I think we discovered early on at first, it's like, well, we'll just wing it. We can talk and blah, blah, blah. And it was okay, but it sort of meanders. It kind of repeats itself. And so we finally discovered that, having some sort of outline to keep you kind of a little bit focused and a little bit idea of what you wanted to cover, right, was always important. Letting it go where it does naturally in the conversation is
Right.
always
Yeah,
important,
and
but at least it makes, yeah,
less is more. You always
yeah.
have another episode. To
Mm,
think that every week for an hour, people are going to be able to take this information and then like apply it is insane. So,
mm.
when you're in school, you're in school 8 hours a day and you barely even really learn anything. So it's only after that you learn. So it's just, that's how I look at it. I look at it as touch points. I look at it, how can I
Mm.
say what I normally say, but in a little bit slightly different way? And how can I present it differently? And, that's marketing. You guys are really you guys are sales pros. In marketing, it's saying the same thing in 1,000 different ways. So but you're on it. You guys are doing it. You got a good thing going. You got the co-host thing. All of our biggest shows are co-hosted. So if that tells you anything, you're in the right track there. And then, yeah, just have fun with it. That's my that's my thing. Because you know, not don't worry about the listeners. You guys got to come back every week and be fired up for it. So.
And we do. We really get a lot out of this personally. It's not only enlightening. We learn from all of our guests. I've learned listening to you here on this call today. Not only do we learn from all of our guests, we learn from each other. And for me, it's pretty inspirational, and it gets us jazzed up to go out and solve new problems with people over the course of the week. So yeah, totally from
You
that
don't
perspective.
know. I'll just leave you guys with that. It's like, I was a mechanic. I was fixing people's cars. Like, I had no idea that I would do this. So, you know, and imagine the people that are listening to this, they already have, I was 18, 19 years old. They already have their career. Like,
Mm.
imagine what a podcast could do that you just don't even know. So I didn't know. And now I'm here doing this. So it all started with me starting a podcast in my parents' garage. So, you know, that's how it goes.
As all great inventions and success stories are, started in mom and dad's garage.
And dad
And
was like, once you leave, you're not coming back. So make sure this podcast thing is going to work. And I was like, okay, dude.
struggle for 20 years, then an overnight success. Exactly right.
All of that, man. Love it.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the call today, Ryan. I always enjoy having conversations with you, which is why you and I have had such a fun time talking today and talking when we've not been on the podcast together. If someone does want to reach out to you, now that they've listened to all the things we've talked about today, we've talked about, having the right messaging, having the right start, having the right structure. What would be the best way for them to reach out to you? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, sure. So, it probably says it, but it's Ryan R. Sullivan. If you use the R, you'll find me faster. If you do Ryan Sullivan, I'm on like page 2 of Google now. So I'm like really working my way. There's a lot of Ryan Sullivans out there, but use the R, you'll find
Right.
me. And that's how you can connect. I mean, LinkedIn is my number one platform, but if we can put the links to that, the website, and my Calendly. I always leave my Calendly out there. If you are in that position, you're a business, typically 6 to normally 7 figures is where we work best because we have that time and money to allocate towards the podcast. If you're in that position, you're like, I know we're going to start one. Maybe we need some help. Yeah, you can grab a call with me.
Well, fantastic. We'll make sure we put all that stuff down in the description for all of the different platforms that we're on that support that. They'll be right down in the episode information. They can click on that, come over and start their conversation with you and get their podcast launched the right way.
There you go. Make sure to subscribe to these guys too.
Absolutely.
Hit that
Yes. Like,
subscribe,
subscribe,
man.
follow, comment, all the algorithms, all the goodness there. That's what
it.
we want. So, folks, that does bring us to the end of our episode today. I hope you got as much out of this as I did. I do want to thank my co-host, Matt Long. Matt, anything you'd like to go and end the show with before we move on to the sunset?
No, I just love this content. It's a little different twist than what we usually talk about, but I think it's been really interesting diving into just different aspects of just the sales and just your experience, I should say, as a person, as a professional, all these things, come into play. And so it's just really fascinating to dissect this a little bit further. So thanks so much, Ryan. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you too. Yeah, seriously, really appreciate it, guys. I'm I'm learning from you guys too. I stay in my podcast lane. So yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate you guys. It's been a pleasure to be on here.
And thanks to the folks who've been watching and listening today to our podcast. Folks, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, like, follow, comment on the podcast. We'd love to see you here again. We'll be back again next week with another guest. If you'd like to go to our website and buy our book, please go so there. There'll be a link to do that in the description of this episode as well. And that way you can follow up on the methodology that Matt and I like to follow and use to help our many clients out there in the world. But until then, folks, thank you for being here. We'll see you again next week. Take care.